Hafidades and Manana Sidzus, and many of God's blessings for all of you here this morning. A very happy Thanksgiving. The Committee on the Guam Buildup would like to call this informational briefing to an order. The time is now 8:31 a.m., and the date is Tuesday, November 26, 2019. For the record, in accordance with 5 GCA Chapter 8, Section 8107, public hearing notices were sent on Monday, November 18, 2019, adhering to the 5-day notice, and a second public notice was sent on Thursday, November 21st, 2019, and Friday, November 22nd, 2019, adhering to the 48 hours prior. In addition, this hearing was noticed on the legislature's website, www.guamlegislature.com. I will note to our listening audience here that, out there, written testimonies may be submitted by emailing speaker@guamlegislature.org, or you may hand deliver any testimony, written testimony, to our office at 163 Chalan Santo Papa, Hagatnya, Guam, 96932. I'd like to recognize my colleagues who are here with me this morning. Good morning, Senator Regine Biscoli, Chairman of the Committee on Rules, and also Senator James Moylan. Sidzus Masi for being here this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, today begins a two-part informational briefing on the Guam buildup. On November 6, 2019, Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and Rear Admiral John Manoni convened the Civil Military Coordinating Council, which is the CMCC, and since its inception in 2010, the November meeting marked the 6th annual convention of the CMCC. I want to share to everyone that representatives of the Government of Guam, the Joint Region Marianas, and the local and U.S. federal agencies also were in attendance. As the chairwoman on the Committee on the Guam Buildup, over the last couple of months, we have held meetings with both Government of Guam stakeholders as well as our federal partners to better understand the impact of the buildup, understanding our shortcomings and identifying our solutions. The recent CMCC meeting, as outlined in the charter, served as a venue for the Government of Guam agencies to share with the Department of Defense recommendations to revise the buildup's current and future construction tempo, as this directly influences workforce population levels and mitigation strategies that impact Guam's environment, social, cultural, and economic well-being as well. Also joining me is our minority leader, Senator Will Castro. Sidzus Masi for being here. I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize the presence also of one of our government agencies, the Department of Public Works, with Deputy Director Jesse Garcia and one of the division supervisors, Mr. Masood. Sidzus Masi for being with us this morning. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we will hear from the Joint Region Marianas, led by Captain Hans Scholey, the Chief of Staff for Joint Region Marianas. And joining him here on the panel today, I will say, is Colonel Bradley McGrath, Captain Joe Grayson, Captain Dan Turner, Mr. Al Borja, Ms. Sandy Yee, and Mr. Roy Titsui. And to my colleagues here this morning, included in your packets are the presentation that is provided, as well as a sheet for all your questions. I'm going to say again, given the vast array of topics that we will be covering and the need for subject matter experts that would need to provide technical answers, I am asking that you write down all your questions, and our committee staff can then compile them to send to the relevant agencies so you can have your questions answered in writing. The questions, once answered, will also be posted on the Guam Legislature's build-up database for all those in our community to access as well. And to those of you watching at home, you can also submit questions to our office via email, which again is speaker@guamlegislature.org. And I will be able to facilitate this process to get you the answers you seek. When sending a question, we will ask that you kindly include your name and the relevant agency that you would like to pose your question to. Those of you who would like to submit questions but do not have access to email, you can also stop by our office or submit them by mail to the office of the Speaker, again, 163 West Chalan Santa Papa, Hagatnya, Guam, 96910. Once answered, your questions will also be posted on our Guam Build-Up database. Other than in the interest of time, given the vast array of topics that will be covered today, another reason that I'm asking that these questions be provided in writing is because most of your questions, I believe, has another side to it, and I want to give the Government of Guam the opportunity to chime in on these questions so that we are on the same page. So without further ado, I will like to ask Captain Shirley if you can begin. And I know I recognized your panel, but you're more than welcome to do it again for the record.
Yes, ma'am. Hafaday and Sisu Samasi for having us here in this historic building and with the 35th Guam Legislature. Speaker Barnes, esteemed senators, citizens of Guam, on behalf of Rear Admiral John Manoni, I'd like to pass his thanks for this opportunity to present the current information regarding the Defense Policy Review Initiative on Guam, or better known as the Marine Corps Buildup. I'd like to go ahead and have the team introduce themselves one by one and tell them their positions in our various organizations, because this does represent a collection of commands and organizations present on the island that are responsible for different aspects of the Marine Corps buildup. So as I said, I'm Captain Hans Schally. I'm the Chief of Staff for Joint Region Marianas and work directly for Rear Admiral John Manoni. Colonel?
Half a day. I am Colonel Brad McGrath. I'm the senior Marine in the Marianas, and I'm the officer in charge of Marine Corps Activities Guam, specifically which will be Camp Blas here within the next year.
Half a day. I'm Joe Greason. I'm the commanding officer of Officer in Charge of Construction, Marine Corps Marianas. I am responsible for the post-award construction of DPRI construction across the island, and I work for Captain Turner.
Good morning, Captain Dan Turner. I'm the commanding officer for Naval Facilities Engineering Command Marianas, and I also am dual-hatted. I serve as the regional engineer for Admiral Manoni.
Afade, my name is Al Borja. I'm the environmental director for Marine Corps Activity Guam. I'm responsible for the environmental management for the Guam buildup.
Half a day. I'm Sandy Yee. I'm a Navy archaeologist and responsible for monitoring and seeing what's happening as far as all of the ground disturbance that's going on.
Half a day. My name is Roy Tsutsui. I am a Special Assistant Advisor to Admiral Manoni for Political Military Affairs and one of 2 Certified Defense Coordinating Officers for Disaster Response.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the opportunity for our team to introduce ourselves and familiarize you with their roles in our organizations. So the opportunity to conduct briefings like today is an opportunity for us as the Joint Region and Department of Defense to share information. And this falls directly in line with Rear Admiral Manoni's command guidance to all DoD personnel on Guam, in which he is committed to being an open and transparent partner to the community of Guam and he wants us to represent our very best as neighbors here on the Marianas Islands. We endeavor to demonstrate this with our actions by inviting executive and legislative members of the island of Guam to engage us with tours and questions, and we have been apt partners in when we're trying to be the best partners possible in sharing the information, sharing access to information, hosting and facilitating tours to answer all questions available. We are committed to programs like this and are happy to facilitate open exchange of concerns, ideas, and coordinations of effort. So we thank you, ma'am, for this opportunity. Our partnership with the Government of Guam is critical to our nation, our role in this community, and our commitment to being good neighbors. While there are many complicated and interlinked aspects to the DPRI buildup, forums like this and the Civil Military Coordination Council and information briefings help us collaboratively solve issues and move forward collectively. Once again, we are thankful to be invited to this historic chamber and the opportunity to address the legislative leaders of Guam. So thank you, ma'am. So moving on to first slide, Guam's military defense. Ma'am, this is just meant as a very brief review of why the Department of Defense considers Guam a very strategic position. We view Guam as a critical linkage in the second island chain as part of the defense in depth of the homeland. Guam is the homeland. The forces stationed on Guam and who deploy through Guam are vital to our national defense in the depth of the Pacific and is part of the Indo-PACOM commanders of keeping a free and open Pacific. The DoD's presence in Guam is part of that strategy and is backed up by historic alliances and regional partnerships. With that brief overview, I'd like to turn you over to, thank you. I'd like to turn you over to Colonel McGrath, and he can talk about the Marine Corps mission on Guam and what the DPRI initiative means to the island of Guam.
All right, so good morning and Hafaday again, and I just would like to say what an honor it is to be here with this esteemed body and these hollow walls, and how blessed I am to live on Guam and call this home. It's truly been an amazing 4 months since I've arrived, and I love every second of this paradise, and I'm so happy you welcome us with open arms, and we can all call this home here on Guam. So as the Marine Corps is increasing their presence on Guam, I just want to talk a little bit more about specifics on kind of what the plan is as we migrate over the next 5 years, and how many people and what the source document is that why we're doing this. So this started a long time ago, but most recently in 2012 there's an international agreement with the government of Japan, and that laid out the laydown, or the proposed laydown, here on Guam, and it was a congressionally mandated move. Currently the plan of record has roughly 5,000 Marines moving to Guam from mainly Okinawa, 4,000 Marines roughly from Okinawa, and then another 900 that will be globally sourced. About a third of those Marines are going to be permanently on Guam. Their homes will be here 360 days a year. And then the rest of the Marines are going to be rotational. So there'll be unit deployment programs, mainly infantry, aviation, coming in for 6 months as a unit, and then departing back to typically CONUS for 6 months. With that buildup, we're going to roughly have 1,300 dependents, families coming in that will be living here, blessed enough to call Guam their home as well. So force flow will begin in the first half of the 2020s. Roughly 2025, when force flow does commence, you're going to see roughly, I have a staff, there's about 20 Marines on the island right now. So we have a relatively small footprint. That will build to 2025 to about 300 Marines, and then force flow will commence at that point with more Marines. However, I have about 40 civilians, which is going to increase to roughly 800, probably more than that, by 2025. And out of those civilians, I am making it my mission to hire local, to make sure that we have Guam represented across the board, from highly technical jobs that University of Guam graduates can come, and local to all the way down to jobs that don't require as much technical ability. So I really want to embrace bringing in the residents of Guam to make our family bigger here on Guam, and not bring in a lot of people from off island. So that's my commitment to you as well. So we're spending almost $9 billion, just under $9 billion on this project. Roughly $3 billion of that the Japanese government is funding, and $1 billion has already been spent. And you can see that when you look around. You can see all the improvements in the roads, infrastructure, water, electricity, ports. So all those projects, and there's more projects that will be upcoming, are tangible. You can see those today, and that investment, a lot of that has already started. So this will be the first new Marine Corps base since the 1950s. So base building in the military is not really not something that's happened in a long, long time. Typically, we reduce in size, and we've been doing that, BRAC, and you've seen some of that here on Guam. But now we're going the other way here, which is awesome. And the base will be named and stood up within the next year. So you will see a base, and it will be Marine Corps Base Camp Blas, named after Marine Corps Brigadier General Blas, which he has such a storied history representing the people from before Liberation Day to after. So we're very excited to stand up the base and have General Blas be its namesake and its lineage. At this point, we'll go to the next slide and kind of talk about why Guam was chosen. So as everybody likes to say, location, location, location is everything, right? As you can see on this slide, this shows distance matters, and strategic position matters, and where you're at. So you can see we're kind of equal distance to almost everywhere in the Pacific. What does that mean? That means on Guam, we can pivot to any threat. So if there's any American interest being threatened by any foreign entity, we're able to respond to that. Also, just as important, if there's natural disasters that we need to respond to, we'll be positioned perfectly for that as well. So we're far enough away from certain threats, but we're close enough to be able to respond in a timely manner when our people, our citizens, American citizens, are in need. Okay, so as we pivot, it's very important to ensure that when we look here on Guam, that our partnership, because the most important thing is that we're on United States soil here. So as we move from Okinawa and some other places, we're moving back to U.S. soil, which what we can do on U.S. soil and how we can help the island of Guam is not an oversight. It's one of the main reasons we wanted to do that. From 75 years ago, when Marines first stepped on the beaches here on Guam, we've had a special relationship with the people of Guam. And that's something that we're not going to put at risk as we move forward. America's first day starts in Guam, and the Marines are going to make sure that it's continued as America's first day into perpetuity. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And I'm going to pass it over to Captain Greason at this point.
Good morning, Hafaday. I'm going to provide a synopsis of the ongoing construction effort and planning that hopefully provides a glimpse into where we're at today and where we see ourselves executing over the next 10 years. First slide I'll present is a disclaimer. Some of the information that we are providing or that I'm presenting in the slides is planning and programming in the planning and programming stage and is subject to change based on appropriations. And we understand that some things may change, but I am providing the best understanding in our current planning information. As the projects come closer to solicitation, more details will be provided, more specific information both in the solicitation and as it is understood. Also, any conversation about small business set-asides, that is specifically defined at the start of the solicitation process. However, I will speak to how we have done it before and our intent. Next slide, please. As an overall understanding, the information we're working off of and the construction effort we are working off of is congruent with the supplemental EIS record of decision of August 2015. We have currently awarded $1.6 billion worth of construction, and we are targeting an overall execution of $8.7 billion with the distribution similar, or what Colonel McGrath said of Government of Japan providing approximately $3.1 billion and the U.S. providing $5.6 billion. The construction effort is in order to relocate Marines from the islands of Japan and to the locations on the slide provided across Guam. Next slide. This slide provides a better understanding of where the effort has been to date, where we are today focused on construction, and I'll talk a little bit about where we are in the next few years. Primarily to date, we have concentrated on Naval Base Guam and Anderson, specifically the North Ramp. At Anderson, it's the Marine Corps Aviation Combat Element, and we have completed the first hangar of two, and we have done all the site improvement utilities at that location. We are currently, what we see, the 5 projects under award at North Ramp provide about 80% of the total. Once completed in the next 2 to 3 years, will provide 80 to 90% of the capability up at North Ramp, and there are only 2 or 3 other additional projects at North Ramp before we complete the capability there. At Naval Base Guam, we have focused on wharf improvements, the harbor infrastructure, and the first project, which was the military working dog relocation that moved the working dog facilities out of the wharf. We are currently constructing the medical clinic and the waterfront headquarters out there, waterfront headquarters, and there will be just a handful of follow-on projects once those are completed in the next year or 2. We have begun construction on the Urban Combat Training Facility at Anderson South. We expect to next year to really start the construction in earnest. Most of the detail to date has been in the design phase and demolition, but we will see more work there, especially across Marine Corps Drive as we construct the fence and initiate construction of the facilities at that location. We are currently under construction at the Live Fire Training Range Complex with the project P715, which is the Live Fire Training Range Complex construction, and we have one other construction project there to start. And we have completed most of the clearing at the utilities and supporting infrastructure project J001B in Finnegajan that will be the new Camp Laws. And we will start our first vertical construction in the second quarter of next year on those projects with 3 barracks that we will start constructing there. We have completed, as far as community infrastructure, the main project we are in charge of is P102 Harmon Power Upgrade. That project completed, substantially completed in September. There are just a few follow-up efforts to do, and then that will be complete. Overall, we have completed 12 projects. We have 11 projects under construction, and we have 83 total projects in the program. The majority of the projects that are not on this slide yet are going to be on Camp Laws. Roughly 53 MILCONs, 53 projects, MILCON and Government of Japan funded projects are located directly on Camp Laws, and that will be the majority as we build up of focus in the following years. Overall, what we see, my office over the past 2 years since I've been there, in 18 we executed $80 million, primarily DPRI related. And this year, in 19, which we just completed, we executed over $190 million. And this year we are targeting $300 million, a little over $300 million for construction. This talks to the ramp up of construction. And as we look forward, our target for FY21 is over $500 million, and we have tentative numbers in FY22 of approximately $800 million. We see the construction peaking in FY23 and FY24, and that's when we would expect to have the most effort going on. As far as the work, the dollars that I'm talking about, those are actual contract execution numbers, the amount of dollars that we are paying our prime contractors to execute the work that then go towards payment of the prime contractor that we have the contract with, as well as subcontractors, small businesses, local contractors in the area. Next slide. Regarding the financial benefit to Guam, I refer back to the 2015 socioeconomic impact analysis statement. And specifically, that analysis identified that at peak, which I see now as being, or we plan now as being in the FY23-24 period, that full-time jobs associated with the DPRI buildup would be increasing by about 7,000 personnel over baseline, with about half expected to go to Guam residents. Currently, we see that the majority of, or that we're not at a 50 to 50% right now. The majority is local hire. We do see an increase in H-2B workers as the construction ramps up. Following 2028, which would be the SEIS's tail off, the steady state on the back end of the buildup, the labor force demand is expected to increase by 1,438 full-time jobs, of which half would be local residents. These would be long-term employment. Additionally, we see approximately $300 million in income at its peak and 67 after 2028. When I talked about work in place, that would be derivative of what the income would be, because approximately half of that work money goes just to payroll. And then the SEIS expected tax revenues to increase by up to $86 million at the peak and a steady state increase of $40 million. What we have seen to date is that most of the contracts that we have awarded have been to contractors with long-term presence on Guam, companies such as Black Construction, Cortec, Hensel Phelps. We see a significant subcontracted work, both to local small businesses and sustained businesses within the region, and we see the work that they are executing to be not quite at capacity, but nearing capacity at this point, and those businesses growing at this right now. We've also seen a significant uptick in supplies and materials throughout the Port of Guam. We are working with our contractors to minimize that impact, but we only expect it to grow. And then, of course, we see increased spending on the island economy for the workforce. So those are the things that we really, when we are looking at capacity, we have conducted recent studies, and we are working within the CMCC to identify where those choke points are in our ability to execute the work, and trying to find ways to alleviate those problems, either through predictive work planning of understanding where they are, spreading out our requirement across a longer time as far as how we bring logistics onto the island, and trying to target those in a proactive way so that the construction can execute on time and meet the requirements of the Marine Corps and Department of Defense. And at that point, I will turn over to Captain Turner.
Good morning. So I'm going to cover just a few different topics. The first is defense access roads. We did want to highlight this, even though it is not something that we directly oversee. These projects are being supervised by the Department of Public Works. However, road intersection and bridge capacities were comprehensively reviewed in preparation for the relocation. And this was done really with the intent to minimize and mitigate any adverse impacts on traffic and the road systems. So this led to a program of individually identified road repair and capacity increases across the island. And what you see on the slide before you are some very specific scopes that are referenced. Most notably, in the first three major bullets called out on this slide are 3 completed improvements that are all along Route 1, Marine Corps Drive, and at the intersections with routes 8, 11, and then all the way up to Route 3. Additionally, jumping down to the next bullet, there's an impressive Route 3 widening project that is ongoing now, and this is planned to be complete in the summer of 2020. And then lastly, and I apologize that, these last two, number 6 and number 7, as they're called out, you'll note on the slide that the graphics did not carry over. So 6 should have an arrow that calls it out up to Route 3, which is essentially the route directly to the east of the Finnegaisian site. And then then number 7 should be calling out the area down by Naval Base Guam, which is essentially the road connector between the main gate of Naval Base Guam and then going up, so all along 2A and then onto 5 as it approaches down and connects with the Naval Magazine area. So that FY23 MILCON, as it's called out there, and I do caution that the planning note that's on there for a cost estimate is purely that. It is purely an early preliminary plan. Please don't place major stake in that, as it's very early in its scoping. And obviously with the FY23 moniker, it's considerably out in the future, so we do have a lot of design effort still to be done, as well as programming to be associated with that project. However, did want to call out that that this is a major road improvement project that is being planned for. It is still very much in planning, but it is very important for the connectivity between Naval Base Guam and the naval magazines. I will also note that this is not part of the Marine Corps relocation. This was infrastructure improvement that needs to take place to basically improve that connectivity. So with that, I will jump on to the next slide, where the major focus here is demonstrating DoD's commitment and partnership to the utility system here on Guam. So I'm very proud of NAVFAC Marianas' partnership with Guam Waterworks and the Guam Power Authority. So Mr. John Benavente and his staff, and Mr. Miguel Bordallo and his staff been very, very supportive. We have an active drumbeat of NAVFAC Marianas staff that meets on a recurring basis, and we consistently are looking for opportunities, and I feel that we have a very open and positive professional relationship, and we're consistently looking for those shared positive outcomes. Frankly, there are many initiatives that are demonstrated here on this slide, and we were just trying to call out a few of the many positive outcomes. For instance, we cooperatively monitor the water quality of the Northern Lens Aquifer. We're exploring exciting new renewable opportunities with GPA to improve resiliency and reliability. And we're doing this with a partnership with GPA and essentially leveraging DoD property in that partnership with GPA so that we can have some new photovoltaic arrays that are then placed on DoD property that will be mutually beneficial both for the community as well as the future power needs for the military. And then lastly, I wanted to call out down there at the bottom that we're also continuing with real property transfers to GPA, again, where those are mutually beneficial to meeting Guam Power Authority's requirements both off-base and on-base. Moving on to the next slide. So, and this one is really very focused on NAVFAC Marianas specifically. However, there's a lot of outreach that NAVFAC Marianas is doing in the realm of workforce development, and I feel that this is permeating throughout the local professional community and providing emerging opportunities. So again, I'm very proud of our summer intern development program, and though not limited to the University of Guam students, the vast majority of our interns are Tritons. And so over the last 2 years, we've had approximately 25 and then 20 in the last 2 summers. We've hired 2 of those students permanently onto our staff. So that has been a fantastic opportunity. I'll also note, so Captain Greason and I are both, as engineers, we're also both on the advisory board for the University of Guam's new School of Engineering, which we feel is very important for Guam's engineering community going forward, both in light of the buildup, but also in light of growth and where the future sees us going. I think it's very important for that technical community, and we're very excited for University of Guam to be able to host that capability going forward. Also noted on here, you'll see that we have a leadership development program that's internal to NAVFAC Marianas, but we are very committed. We have very high level engagement and support, frankly, throughout the chain of command to ensure that we are doing our very best to invest in our future leaders. And again, as I've experienced, certainly there are shared professional linkages between NAVFAC Marianas, as some folks leave NAVFAC Marianas and they go to work in the private sector here, and then the reverse is also true as we hire people into NAVFAC Marianas. So we feel that these development opportunities are important, not only internally, but as they're also exported over time. We are also exploring internal rotational opportunities under the LDP as well as just within our leadership framework. Then also, I'm very proud, and I think it's largely due to the small and the tight-knit community here that we have a lot of engagement outside with, so what you'll note here on this slide is the Society of American Military Engineers, and we've hosted several Industry Day forums, but that really permeates throughout the Guam locally, as many of our contractor partners are engaged not only through that, but through the Guam Contractors Association and various other professional forums that we are constantly engaged with and supporting. And we're very proud of that outreach. And I only expect that that's going to continue as we go through the buildup. We've had roughly a drumbeat of having one outreach event probably about every 6 months that's on a fairly large macro scale where we host our contractor partners both off base, so typically down in Tumon and off base, to further that relationship as we move forward with the significant amount of actions that we're going through. And then lastly, and I apologize to Dr. Jensen as I have a typo here on my slide, we have a partnership with the Water Environmental Research Institute, so that should be WERI, not WEIR. So WERI, again, I think that across, not only with WERI, but also with all facets of the engineering program and environmental aspects of the professional community here on Guam, NAVFAC is very, very engaged. And then lastly, over on the right-hand side, we have several formal training opportunities where we are bringing off-island expertise on island. Again, this is primarily focused internally, but again, I do feel that those opportunities are shared both internally and externally. And again, and I'll just point out that very bottom picture is a representative class for our summer intern development program, again, where the majority of the graduates are University of Guam, but not solely. But they are an exciting group to work with, and it's been truly my honor to host that, and I see that that program will continue going forward. I would expect on the magnitude of about 20 to 25 students every year as we go forward, and continuing to build that relationship and that future capability in close partnership with the University of Guam and the engineering school. And I think that wraps up my comments. So with that, I will turn over the floor.
Good morning, honorable speakers, esteemed senators. Again, thank you for the opportunity to provide you with information again today. I'm sorry. Yes. For the environmental management slide, we're focusing on responsible stewardship. For the win-win solution for the Guam buildup, we understand that it has to be a responsible buildup and must benefit the local community to the greatest extent practicable and within our capabilities. And through that, our first point here regarding environmental management, we are laser focused on delivering and safeguarding our environmental commitments to the people of Guam. We have, and with the unique capabilities of a Guam-based environmental staff, I think we're well positioned to delivering that. Our in-house staff, our contractors, cooperators, many of them from the University of Guam, use their in-depth knowledge of ecology and culture to ensure that we properly manage our resources in accordance with the agreements that we have, both with local agencies but also with federal agencies as it pertains to environmental management. With these close partnerships with cooperators and contractors, many of them local firms, we are actually seeing them pick up more Guam-based technicians, scientists, and even those in the trades to support our environmental management work. Just for example, our forest enhancement nursery, which we've recently established at the Finnegadza and the future Camp Blas site. A lot of the nursery staff are actually University of Guam graduates, they're local staff, and I think they're doing a really great job in making sure that the listed species, the threatened and endangered species that we are trying to propagate in that facility actually succeed in their growth, and they can be outplanted in our future forest enhancement site. So the unique capabilities of those who come from here, who understand the unique environment of Guam, are really in the best position and are vested in making sure that our environmental management program is a success. Moving on to laws and regulations, you know, as I mentioned earlier about having folks that are well versed in managing work, environmental work that's here on Guam, as they've gained most of their experience here on island, they have a closer appreciation of Guam laws and Guam regulations that apply to our work, and in that that helps the management work be more focused on Guam-specific applications. And I think using that principle, we are better able to protect the resources that we are charged to oversee. And with a greater understanding of our local frameworks, I think the outreach to local agencies and regulators are more effective. Just as an example, we're working with the Guam State Historic Preservation Office to increase their capacity to provide more oversight and closer reviews on all work throughout the island. So we're bolstering their staffing to ensure that they can actually carry out the work in an efficient and effective manner. So that close coordination and cooperation with Mr. Patrick Lujan, I think, has served us both well. I know that Mr. Patrick Lujan has been, focused on making sure that he upholds historic preservation on island, and we do anything in our power to make sure that we meet those mutually achievable goals. Moving on to our community awareness point here. As I've said many times before in prior visits by the legislature to our construction sites, we will be sensitive and responsive in our engagements, and we will maintain the transparency that has been, essentially permeates our operations at Joint Region Marianas and Marine Corps Activity Guam. So we will uphold those commitments to you. And we've been seeking out opportunities actually to set up engagements, individual engagements with local agencies like the Guam Coastal Management Program with Mr. Edwin Regis and his staff, working with Mr. Walter Leon Guerrero at Guam EPA, trying to seek out how we can work together to have a more efficient process, for example, for review of Guam projects. So that's, I'm proud of those efforts, and those gentlemen that I just mentioned, they have expressed their appreciation for the work that we do to essentially go the extra mile in linking up with them. Last point here for responsible stewardship is highlighting our participation in what I call the green economy. I think that term has been used elsewhere, but environmental services is part of Guam's economy. At any type of human activity, whether it's development, operations, there's an environmental component to that. And I think, we are one of the larger operations of Guam, if not the largest, for environmental work. Throughout the Guam buildup, we're estimating more than $100 million in investment in environmental services. So it is a very large operation. We are contributing to Guam's economy and driving that engine. But essentially, we are effectively using those resources to garner the most benefit to the island as we can, and we are, utilizing local talent and local firms to achieve our goals. Those are the few things that I want to highlight from our environmental management system and program, and I will turn the next slide over to Ms. Sandy.
Half a day, everybody. I'm really grateful to have this chance to show you, as well as the public, what we are doing that's helping to preserve and also educate about what we're finding up there. We've been working with the Guam SHPO, and we have preserved the overwhelming majority of the sites as we are working up there. We've been consulting with the SHPO through many different stages along the way, starting back in 2011 or before with the programmatic agreement. This is governing the standard operating procedures. What do we go about doing when we find something? We're monitoring additionally as requested by SHPO, and we consult with them on every discovery, whether it's a site, a feature, or some other items that we're finding in the field. This has resulted in, I guess, the term often used in politics is gerrymandering. The sites, the actual layout for the live fire training range was moved and situated so that it would avoid the majority of the eligible sites. And we have continued to move things around so that we're preserving sites in place. This is an example that during the design phase, we did identify additional opportunities to preserve sites. In looking at some of the maps, we were able to move a road and preserve several sites in place rather than originally planning to data recover. Now, we have several Secretary of the Interior, or SOI, archaeologists on the Navy side, and we're overseeing the recovery and documentation of the cultural materials that will inevitably be affected, even though we've moved things around to avoid major impacts. Many sites, many sites have been discovered and preserved and recovered, meaning the data was recovered from there as well as the artifacts. And archaeological preservation and the people in the professional community as well as the general community have been surprised by how much was up there. All the material will be destined for the Guam Cultural Repository. It's going to be studied, cleaned, cataloged, and stored with federal standards. And the utmost respect is shown to the federal curation standards. They must have proper temperature and humidity, pest control, be hardened against bad weather, and they must have high security. And those are all being planned in the repository so that all of the items we're finding and the previous items for the Government of Guam will be preserved in this first-rate facility. And we're going to continue to protect Guam's historical record. It's not just during the buildup. We have permanent positions for people who will be maintaining oversight on what's happening. If there's a damage due to storm, mitigation will occur. There will be educational outreach, and I think many of you have probably seen the educational booklets that were prepared in English and Chamorro for both the northern Anderson property of the live fire range as well as the cantonment down in Finagadzan. Now, due to this archaeological oversight that's going on now and continuing, now that the vegetation is being removed, we're actually finding many more sites. When this was surveyed for the preliminary layout of where sites were found so that we could move and avoid them, the jungle was thick, and surface survey does not entail or permit us to start clearing the land. But now that the land is getting cleared, with archaeological monitors watching, we're finding that this area has an abundance of information. Pre-contact, pre-European contact, that is, this area was intensively utilized, which we didn't have any evidence of in the oral record or any of the written records. But we're finding artifacts and features and whole sites that the jungle had overtaken. We did not know they were there. And thank you, Senator Moylan, for mentioning this earlier, that this buildup is actually giving us more historic data than we would have had it just continued as it was. So there's a bright side to this, that we are increasing our knowledge of the past tremendously. Our children and children's children will know more about what was going on and how intensively the land was utilized. Additionally, we do have part of our program is for tours. Now, several of you have been out on the tours that were presented just at the legislative request or at the governor's request, but we also have the public access tours, and that program can be very flexible. So more of the public are getting out to see things, and we're hoping this will even grow so that the school children will be able to see some of these pristine sites. Well, I would just like to close the cultural resource part that we're very grateful for the opportunity. We've been able to add to the history of Guam due to the DoD due diligence that they must follow all of these federal laws, which sometimes seem binding, but they've resulted in a lot of education for all of us. So I will now turn it over to Mr. Tsutsui.
Ma'am, before I turn it over to Mr. Susui for a review of the CMCC, I'd like to just reiterate Joint Region Marianas and the Department of Defense's commitment to the Guam's 4 pillars, ma'am. So on slide 15, you'll see the review of the agreement that the Undersecretary of the Navy and the former governor of Guam ratified in 2011. So as we've discussed, many of the projects highlighted today fall in line with the One Guam initiative, in which the department is committed to improving the quality of life for the people of Guam and the military personnel who call Guam home. It's through partnerships with Dar Roads, Guam Power, grid improvements, wastewater treatment improvements, and agency partners such as GPA, GWA, the Guam Department of Labor, Guam EPA, and many, many more. We've been able to push the One Guam concept farther and farther, and it is Admiral Manoni's expressed desire to continue the relationship, and what is good for DoD is good for Guam on this island. He sees this as an ecosystem where we both symbiotically exist and serve in each other's best interest. Moving on to a green Guam, our department is committed to developing the most energy-efficient infrastructure possible in supporting Guam's effort to develop sustainable and renewable projects, primarily through infrastructure upgrades with Guam Power Association and Guam Water. We've moved to this, whether it's photovoltaic cells for renewable energy initiatives, or making more efficient wastewater treatment plants. Green Guam is definitely something that is in our best interest, because we share resources on this island, and as we know, resources are valuable and also scarce. So the more we can do to minimize our footprint, first as DoD, but also as an island community, the more sustainable our island and our nation and our world is. Moving on to 24-hour and 7-day access to Paget. Ma'am, we heard Guam loud and clear on this, and we pivoted away from those potential areas. While this no longer remains a issue for the DoD, I think it reflects the commitment to listening, and that's why we eventually moved the live fire training range to its current site. So we have preserved Paget. We have preserved the village, the caves, and the access. We heard you loud and clear. So, and the residents of Guam. And finally, moving on to a net negative, we still have a lot of work to do here, ma'am. The Department of the Navy owns 27% of the property here on Guam. We are committed to a smaller footprint. And we are working with GovGuam partners through the Joint Land User Group, and also through the proposal from the Guam Economic and Development Agency, which recommended land turnover. We owe a letter back to, when I say we, the Secretary of the Navy owes a letter back to the Governor of Guam to let her know what our options are for turning over more land. And it has been Admiral Manoni's personal initiative in his 4 months in command. He is not satisfied with our pace, and he wants us to do this faster. It doesn't mean everything will be turned over, but it does mean that we will consider it. We will consider it with our partners, and you have his word that he will do it as expeditiously as government processes and bureaucratic processes will allow. So next, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Roy Susui to review the relationship, and also through the Civil Military Coordination Council.
Thank you, Captain. Hafade, once again, I'm Roy Tsutsui, born and raised in Guam, University of Guam alumni, and hired by the Navy to be a special assistant advisor to the Admiral to help with political military affairs and the continuity of operations in our relationship with the Government of Guam, as well as other governments in our region. And I would like to amplify and describe more in detail, as part of that relationship, the Civil Military Coordination Councils and what the current focus interest area is of the CMCC. Thank you, earlier speaker, for describing the history of the CMCC. And so I won't go into the history. I would just like to focus on the current focus area. Although there's a wide variety of focus areas that the CMCC looks at to see if there's any horizon impacts that are caused by the military realignment that may affect the pace or sequence of the military realignment or the community of Guam. So in that area of focus, the most current interest area is on the Government of Guam manpower shortage that was first studied in 2010 and then revised and updated in 2015 with the socioeconomic impact analysis statement in 2015. And again, in 2015, that study projected that there would be some shortfall in manpower of the Government of Guam related to the military realignment. And that, again, is in addition to the current and existing shortfall that's not related to the military realignment. But the CMCC is looking in particular for what is that impact to the military affected shortfall of Gov Guam manpower. So in that analysis, the CMCC has developed a working group, a joint working group with the Government of Guam and the military to update the 2015 study that looked at the manpower of Gov Guam. And that is in progress as we speak. It was actually, we started with Guam EPA and the Department of Labor a few years ago. But most recently, after the November 6th CMCC meeting, the working group was combined to look at the entire Government of Guam agencies to see what the updates are in terms of their shortfall needs, and to look for not just the impact caused by the military realignment, but also are there ways that the working groups can recommend and the CMCC can recommend for solutions. And they're looking at it very holistically. So the working group will be looking at the manpower shortage in terms of everything from the processes that require a workload to see if there's any way to streamline or improve processes within, like, for example, permitting process, etc. They're also looking at is there any root issues, like maybe salary levels or something that are causing vacancies. Also looking at, is there federal sponsors that agencies already have with authorities and funding that may be available to help with these? And if that's the case, then the CMCC, as the military committed in the 2015 Environmental Impact Statement Record of Decision, it committed that should there be federal agencies that do have authority and funding authority to support Gov Guam shortfall and manpower, that the military committed to be an advocate for Gov Guam to those federal agencies at the highest level to advocate for filling those manpower shortages with those federal agency authorities. And then the CMCC will also look at, in the event that it's not a federal agency solution, it's not a Gov Guam solution, and it is a military solution that is needed or recommended, then the CMCC will take those as validated by the working group, and the CMCC would make the recommendation up through the Pentagon, so that the Pentagon would then see validated requirements that have been thoroughly looked at from both local as well as federal resources, and the recommendation is that the military address this. And so when the military addresses those shortfalls, they would look at first, is it acceptable to have the delays that would be caused by the shortfalls? And if so, then they would plan to incorporate those delays. If the delays are not acceptable, then they would look at how can the military then help to resolve the solution. One classic example, as briefed earlier, was the State Historic Preservation Office needed some manpower assistance. And so that has already been put in place and is now being looked at for improvement for a full-time technical specialist to assist the SHPO's office. And so that's an example of where the DoD can come in with its authority and look for solutions to help where it's appropriate for the DoD to do that. And so this is ongoing, and the working group is required to brief at the next quarterly CMCC meeting, and the governor would like to have it sooner than later. And so the Admiral and the governor have looked at February timeframe to have the next CMCC meeting, no later than March, but shooting for February. And so what they're going to be doing is, again, besides the wide variety of focus areas, looking at the manpower shortage as a very important shortfall that has to be resolved. Thank you very much.
Situs Masi, and to the panel, thank you very much for your presentation. At this time, I will open just for comments from my colleagues. I will start with our Committee on Rules Chair and person who also has oversight of federal and foreign affairs, Senator Regine Biscoli.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker, and gentlemen, and Ms. Sandy, thank you for joining us this morning and for giving us this update. I'm really grateful for creating this space and to have that opportunity to share this information. We had our Government of Guam agency heads in here yesterday, kind of updating us on that side. So it's important that we have our DoD partners here as well. I will be submitting a number of questions to each of you on all the areas that we covered today, so I appreciate all of the updates in terms of construction and workforce development, all of those things. But one thing that also kind of came out to me was just the summer intern development program and your leadership development program. We also have interns here at the Guam legislature. We have a public policy institute as well that the speaker is spearheading along with our colleagues. And so it would be good to kind of get maybe all of them together for a day and talk a little bit about our role in the legislature and have you folks talk to our interns, and maybe we can do some kind of coordination on that point. But I do have a number of questions, and I thank you in advance for considering all of the things that we are asking and responding in a timely manner. So thanks again for your time, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity.
Situs Masi, Senator Lee. Minority Leader, Senator Will Castro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, thank you to the members of the panel for your time and the updates. I also want to underscore the Rules Chair statement about the need to maintain this dialogue. I couldn't agree more, Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity, especially if we're going to continue to operate in good faith with our federal partners. A couple of points. I also will be submitting some questions specific to my points. I do appreciate the military's commitment to the net negative pillar, and I also appreciated today's presentation and something just kind of dawned on me on the net positive in terms of the jobs. It was mentioned here that Captain Colonel McGrath, did I get that right? Your commitment to hire local. And if you look at the reference document, the 2015 SEIS, it said that half the jobs would go, and so I hope that your tour is extended way past 2028. I hope that your successor and the leadership carry on your sentiment. It's an important one, because if you take the 2015 statement of half and work towards 3/4, and eventually almost all jobs that within reason are filled by locals. Appreciate that as well. someone was futuring, to use that term loosely, futuring about the School of Engineering and your partnership with the University of Guam. Thank you so much for that. And it's when I heard that that it dawned on me. Madam Speaker and the respective committee chairs, this is actually a unique opportunity, ma'am, where we can hone in on military occupational specialties that if you thought about it, if you're thinking past 2028, can actually reposition, reposture Guam as a high-tech zone, a high-tech hub that can require training and employment in areas that don't require heavy artillery or don't restrict the use of oceans and lands and air, things like cybersecurity, cyber terrorism, and unmanned aerial equipment such as drones. And so I'll close my statements off by encouraging you to please explore that further. And I thank you again, Speaker, Committee Rules Chair, and my colleagues for allowing me to participate in this dialogue. I do support a responsible buildup for the people of Guam and all of the Marianas. Thank you.
Minority Leader, Senator Jim Moylan, I will recognize you now.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, panel. I'm confident from the briefings I heard yesterday and today's briefings as well that we are moving forward in the military buildup, and we're working together quite well. I think we've learned a lot, and we continue to learn. I'm also looking forward to February's with the CMCC follow-up meeting on how we work together with our labor force, how the government can support this buildup as well. So I thank you, panel, and thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Moylan. And before we adjourn, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that also BSP Director Tyrone Titano was also in the room, and thank GPW for coming here on a second day to hear the presentation, but also to gather the much-needed information that's shared by both of you so that our listening audience will know that the participation is there. Sidzu Asmasi, Masood, and Mr. Garcia. Again, to the listening audience, individuals who wish to submit questions for this panel and for yesterday's panel, please do so by emailing it to speaker@guamlegislature.org, or you may send or hand deliver it to the office of the Speaker at 163 Chalan Santo Papa, Hagåtña, Guam, or emailing your question to speaker@guamlegislature.org. I want to extend an undunklin Asitsu Asmasi, Captain Shirley, for you, Colonel McGrath, for you and your team for being here. Again, very important, as you note, that the CMCC will be meeting hopefully in February, at latest March, but that continued collaboration that is needed so that our community will know that as we look at adhering to the 4 pillars that we as policymakers have done in the working efforts with the military, that those 4 pillars are being adhered to, and even the hopes of bringing some of our lands back to our people. This is what it's all about. It's about presenting all the information, being accountable for how the project is going to proceed, but more importantly, for making sure that our community understands that we have to work together for this build-up to be successful. And the Minority Leader talked about a responsible build-up. Our Committee on Rules Chair talked about the collaboration and even the need as we bring our interns, our younger generation who continues to learn from what we are doing here. Important that we come together and collaborate and literally maybe even step it up a notch so that the younger generation understands what they need to do when it's their time to lead, continue to lead. So with that being said, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, blessed holidays, and I will call this meeting, this public hearing, adjourned at 9:46 a.m. in the morning. Sidzu Asmasi. Thank you.